After Godfather Part 1 last time, we are now looking at Godfather Part 2, and we will be looking at Godfather Part 3, but Part 2 is the name of the game this time. I do have to start with an apology. We said that it was going to be out last week, but personal circumstances and stuff, which basically I haven't told the others. So, yeah, it's all my fault. So if you want to comment, just say Charlie's to blame, hashtag bad host. I don't know. Do whatever you need to. It would be nice if you interacted on Twitter. It'd be lovely. But no, sadly, that doesn't seem like the platform where we get the most interactions. Anyway, 1972 Godfather, 1974 Godfather Part II. This is it cost 13 million to make, and it made 93 million worldwide. I guess it's probably, if you thought the first one was good, you'd be really chomping at the bit for the next one. Bit like Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, I suppose we'll get into famous sequels and whether or not the sequel is better than the original. This always gets bandied around as probably the best example of where that might actually be true. But before we get to all of that, let's have the scores. Let's have the initial thoughts. Let's have the scores. I think most of you people that listen or watch know who everybody is, but John and Doe. John and Doe? God, crikey. Should lay off the Advil. Joe and Dom will introduce themselves and tell you their thoughts and the score, and then I'll go last. So, gents, I'm going to flip the coin, and the coin is going to be Joe.
All right. Yeah, so I got to say, I love this movie. It's really tough between this and the first Godfather. I mean, right out of the boat, I got to give it a 10, just like the original one. And I guess I flip-flop back and forth as to which one is my favorite. But I think after seeing it this time, the Godfather Part One is my favorite. But this one is just so amazing. It's probably one of the best sequels ever made. And it's rare for something like that to happen. And like you mentioned, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, I think what makes this so good is that, and what makes the sequel so good is that it's just not more of the same. It's something different. And that's what the Empire Strikes Back was for me. It's like, this was completely different from the original one. It's very easy just to repeat the same formula over and over again. But what they did with the Godfather Part II is they introduced the whole origin of Vito Corleone when he was in Corleone, Italy, and how he came to America. And I just love that whole section, the flashbacks of that. I think it's perfect. And there's some parts of the movie that still always confuse me at times. That's not very clear cut, but it's still such a fantastic movie. Just great direction, great acting, great cinematography. It's basically, that's where it repeated, where I love that it looks just like it is part two, right from the first one. And I will say, I started watching part three, and that's my biggest complaint, is that it doesn't look like the first two.
Yeah.
It looks like they used a lot of modern technology with the camera work and all that. And I think that was a big misfire. Like, they should have made it feel like the other two, and it just doesn't. Anyway, so yeah, I give it a 10 out of 10. And yeah, can't say anything more except I love the sequel.
Wow. A good start. Dom.
Yes, so clearly this is a great film. The casting's exceptional. So not only do you have two all-time greats at the absolute height of their powers in the form of De Niro and Pacino, but the supporting cast and the background cast as well, I think, are brilliantly selected. I particularly loved, I had to look his name up, Bruno Kirby as the young Peter Clemenza. So that's the guy that Vito goes into business with when they go into their kind of housebreaking and start their petty crime career. And the direction and the set design are brilliant. I thought Joe's point there spot on about the look and feel of the film, that recreation of Ellis Island and kind of just after turn of the century New York with the animals in the streets. Even though you're watching it at the cinema, it's almost like a sensory experience that you can almost get the smells and the sounds and the taste of it in your throat as well. So which I thought was brilliant. And my favourite section of the whole film, spoiler alert, is De Niro as Vito Corleone. Stalking Don Fanucci along the rooftops, and then the kind of execution that he does there. I just thought it was brilliant. I think after watching them in quick order, back to back, I do prefer the original. I did. It's tough, and Joe's right. You can kind of make a strong case either way. I prefer to see Michael's transformation and his kind of descent to the Godfather, as opposed to the kind of consolidation of the power and the kind of effects it had on him. And my favourite parts of Godfather 2 are the flashback to Vito Corleone's rise and the way that De Niro portrays him. I thought was just exceptional. If you're being hyper mega critical, I thought there were perhaps aspects of Godfather 2 which were a bit repetitive. The death of the brother, the coordinated killing scenes towards the end, which are reminiscent of the baptism. But this is, very much nitpicking. So it's wonderful cinema, fantastic. I've scored it a contrary 9.5, 9.5 out of 10 rather than the full 10. But I need to differentiate it clearly. It's an absolute pleasure to sit down and watch Godfather 2 and to talk about it on here with you, gents, and to our wonderful listeners. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Excellent, very eloquent, very well put. I'm with you with the 9.5, by the way. I should just say that straight out the gate, simply because The Godfather is the better movie. I know people should just say, look, they're both great movies. You should score them appropriately. They should both be 10s. But I do think that there should be that sort of wriggle room. I'd have to say that I think I preferred the first one simply because of the build up, the anticipation. When you come to Godfather Part 2, it's already all the structure's already in place. All the things are there. You know the characters. You understand them, and I think I loved that context building that occurred in number 1. Certainly the wedding scene, right at the start. I do miss Marlon Brando. We'll get to that as the reasons why he was supposed to come back for the family scene, but he didn't. And we'll get to that. I must admit, I like a good story, and I like to follow a good story. I had trouble with parts of this, is knowing, wait a minute, why is he doing that, and what's happening there, and why has he said that? And so there's a little bit there. I think the Cuba thing sagged a little. Even though it contains one of the best scenes and one of the best lines, I still think that on the whole it sags a little bit. We'll get to it. I think Diane Keaton is totally superfluous to this whole story, as she was in the first one, and unfortunately she plays a big part in number 3, which I equally started watching Joe as well, and it had that weird thing. I think it was in between 1986 and 1995. You had this weird CGI and weird special effects that people started using. It looked fake. It didn't look very well. They used it in The Untouchables when he threw him off the top of the building and things. It was just things like that. And so yeah, we'll get to number 3 next time. But yeah, I mean, De Niro's great. Pacino's great. Yes, they're in the movie. Yes, they're in the same movie, but not in the same movie. We had to wait until Heat in 1995 for them to meet each other on screen for the first time. But it's wonderful. Again, it's cinema that just takes you away. Exactly what I said in the last time. It's cinema that reminds you what a good film is like. It reminds you what good filmmaking, good structure, good story, great acting. It just reminds you that when it all comes together, it really does come together, and it puts some of these recent films to absolute shame. We probably won't even talk about Snow White, but you've got things, lavish, wonderful things that they consider to be epic, and you're like, wait a minute, epic? Let's go back to the 70s, shall we? And let's have a look at what truly is epic. So yeah, 9.5 for me. I'm sure we're going to get into it, but how about we watch the trailer? Yeah, right, okay. Well, here is the wonderful trailer. Here we go.
The history of 2 generations of crime. The drama of absolute power and the men who violate it. The Godfather Part II.
What is your name?
Don Vito Corleone and his son, Michael. Both had seen the ones they loved most cut down before their eyes. Both had killed as an act of vengeance. Both commanded the most powerful and merciless crime organization in the world.
Is it true that in the year 1950, you devised the murder of the heads of the so-called 5 families in New York?
It's a complete falsehood.
They would take any measures.
I mean, you've won. You want to wipe everybody out?
I don't feel I have to wipe everybody out, Tom. Just my enemies.
Make any arrangement.
Michael, we're bigger than U.S. Steel.
So for those listening and watching, if you actually do go and watch the trailer is like 3.5 minutes long. Yeah, we can't put that in simply because we do love you, but you don't need to listen to the whole thing. So it's a slightly truncated, but it's still a good trailer. It still has that wonderful the voiceover guy. So as long as that's all there and in place, it's fine. So I'm hoping Oscar Bance is coming back. He says, yes.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely fantastic, because it's very interesting, Oscar Bance, on that one. I think we had a discussion before the podcast. What we're going to do is like take it a bit more chronologically in order, and we're going to talk about the scenes as they are in order, and then just have like a general chat on it. So Dom, what is first? We're talking about the attempted assassination attempt.
Yeah, we are. So let's start at the start, controversially, with Lake Tahoe, birthday party, and assassination attempt. What did we think of that?
Joe?
No, I think it was a great scene. I mean, in a way, it does mirror a little bit the wedding from The Godfather, but it sets up like a lot of new characters. Like you meet Johnny Ola and you meet Frank. What's his name? Frankie. Oh, I forget his name. Pentangeli. And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but it's just interesting the way that they portray that communion. Like we used to have communion parties when we were younger. Like when I was a kid, I had communion raised in the Catholic Church. This was a pretty lavish one. I mean, they had so many people there. The property that he had in Nevada, was just amazing. And it also sets up too. I mean, he is basically the king now. Like where before he, at the very end of the movie, he did away with his enemies in the first one, and now you can tell he's got even more control and more power, and he has to deal with politicians and also, people in his family that are not happy. And when I say family, I mean in the mafia. And then he's got to deal with his own family, with his children and his wife. He has to make them happy. I do feel for Michael in a way, because I always felt in the beginning he did want to legitimize the family, and get out of the whole mafia business. And he has tried to do it, but there's always things that happen, like in Godfather 3, when he says, just when I think I was out, they bring me back in. And that's exactly what they do with Michael, because, it's hard to say he's a good guy after the events that happen and at the end of Godfather 1. But I think that, he loves his wife and he loves his family, and he does want to get rid of it. But it's something that's very hard to do, because how we've seen in these movies, even when you let your guard down just a little bit, someone's going to bump you off or bump someone else off that you love. But no, I think that scene is just great. I love the scene with the senator when he's talking in his office with Michael, and he's trying to basically swindle him into paying him ungodly amounts of money for opening like new hotels and all that. It's just a great scene. There's so many great scenes in this movie too. But anyway, that's my point of view.
Yeah, I think it's more about he's never going to be his dad. Yes, he has presence, but whether or not he has the same presence that his father did, I don't know. When you look at that, it's not my favorite Pacino performance, because the brooding seems to have taken effect. Very, very brooding, very, whereas his, father was quite, exuberant, and, he barely cracks a smile. Whereas in the first one, you genuinely had some emotion all around the place from Vito Corleone. And I think that's the mark of this film, really, because it's a case of, I would have liked a bit more life from him. I would have liked a bit more emotion from him. Yes, he had the emotion. Yes, we did see the emotion, especially when we get to the scene with Diane Keaton. But yeah, it was great opening. Yeah, fantastic for me.
Well, 2 points I make, I think there. One is you talk about his lack of exuberance and this kind of vibe that he brings to the film, but I think that's kind of part of the point, really, is that it shows you how this power, it's not glamorous, it's not lavish. I mean, the lifestyle is, but the effect on him is that it kind of destroys him, really, doesn't it? It hollows him out. The kind of loving son and brother that he was at one point is gone, and to the extent that he ends up murdering his own brother later on. And frankly, the life of a top gangster mafia boss like this must be corrupting, and everywhere people are trying to cheat you and swindle you. You can't trust anybody. Eventually his own wife has an abortion because she's rejecting him and his values to such a degree. And I think that's kind of what the film portrays, is that further descent. If you want to have that, you've got to pay the cost of it, and the cost is that it kind of totally corrupts you and corrupts your soul, really, I think. The other point I'd make about this opening scene is it does, no pun intended, set the scene for the rest of the film. I just wonder if Coppola leans a little bit heavily into using kind of vibrant backdrops like this throughout the film. So you've got this scene, you've got subsequent scenes set in Cuba against the backdrop of the revolution, to the extent that it all happens on the night that the revolution occurs. You have the Vito Corleone in early New York. I can't remember what the occasion is. Is it Easter or some sort of religious event that's going on in the streets?
San Gennaro feast.
Yeah, so like a big feast day in the local neighborhood, and so kind of all the big set piece scenes. There's a lot going on in the background, which obviously as a viewer is really engaging, and I totally get why he does it. But it's sort of the fourth cycle of some big band and music and crowd scene going on, and just maybe marginally it's at the expense of some of the character development, perhaps. So it's a bit of a shortcut to showing us what's going on. But anyway, all that said, I really enjoyed the scene here where Fredo's wife is drunk and flirting with other men, and he can't handle that, and he has to actually get one of his kind of acolytes, one of the bodyguards, to come in and sort that out for him. There's a reason this was chosen as kind of opening for this, because it does give you that insight into how much he's fallen as well, and kind of what in comparison to his brother, what a pathetic character Fredo has become.
Absolutely. I would say, though, if Sonny hadn't been offed at the ticket booth in number one, and he'd actually become the Godfather, I think you would have seen that mixture of emotions. He's very hot-headed. He's very passionate about things. He's very into it. I can imagine he would like a laugh and a cigar while he's and I think you would have probably seen what I was looking for from Pacino, from Michael. So yeah, in that sense, yeah, perhaps. Are we going to do before we go into the next scene? Are we going to do Oscar bounce? Or are we going to wait for it until we start? Because I think next on the list might be the introduction of Robert De Niro as a very young Vito Corleone.
Well, I was going to say, before we leave this section, though, like, you want to finish this section first?
You go for it, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Because there was, something. Yeah, there's something that I wanted to ask you guys. Like, the one thing I think that we all kind of have a complaint with is that a lot of times, like, the viewer isn't in the know of what things have happened, and it's never resolved. Like, one in particular that happens in this scene is somebody opens the shades or the curtains, and then when Michael steps up there, the assassins try to kill him. So who was it that did that? They never make clear who it is, and how it was done and all that. And there's a lot of that in this movie too. But do you guys? What are your thoughts? Do you have any idea who it could be?
I think it was the guy getting revenge for the killing of the hotel guy, the Vegas guy, number one. Again, I'm rubbish with names.
Oh, you think Johnny Ola?
Mm.
But Johnny Ola, he came and he went. You know, he basically visited him and then he left.
Mm.
I mean, I heard different. I went online to see what people's thoughts
Okay.
were, and a lot of people think it was Rocco. You know, that they had gotten a Rocco.
Oh, the guy that
And,
basically they sent in the hitman guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why at the end, like he basically puts him on a suicide mission.
Mm.
You know, to kill off. Uh, I'm so bad with names.
Well, because there's so many in this. There's so many
Hyman
different
Roth.
strands. Right. Yes.
Yeah, because you know, and again, Fredo was that's another thing too. It's like, what did Fredo know and what didn't he know? And like he was surprised that there was a hit on it, but what did he expect too? Like, what was he trying to do? And that's another thing. Again, we'll discuss is the betrayal by Fredo, and why did it bother Michael so much? Like, because at times, like when I watch this movie, it's like, did he really do anything that bad? You know, like, or was he just taken advantage of?
I think it's a
But
mixture of both.
Yeah, I did catch something this last time that I can understand why he did kill him at the end, where prior to that I never did. But that was my point. I was just like, there's a lot of scenes where we see where even like with the whole thing with like he goes to sorry if I'll stop after this. Like when he goes to Hyman Roth and he basically kind of tells him that he thinks it's Frank Pantangeli that did it, and then he tells Pantangeli, well, I think it was Roth that did it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It gets confusing as to, well, who do you really think it is? Because you're not letting the viewer know. Like we have to assume which one he's telling the truth to. But anyway, that's my point.
But I suppose my view on this would be that it's intentional by the director, and it almost kind of reflects Michael's lack of understanding and lack of clarity about exactly what's gone on. You know, he's presented with a situation where there's an assassination attempt and he doesn't know who's opened it, and he doesn't know what the reasons are at that particular time, at least. So I suspect it's more that, like, it's deliberately ambiguous, or the director feels confident enough not to have to kind of, in a linear way, lay it all out for people. Because I suppose the alternative is that there's a bigger film here and that some of that ended up on the editing room floor. But I guess my read on it would be that it's deliberate, and that kind of, you are right, sometimes it does skirt from ambiguity into slightly confusing territory, but yeah, that's my assessment. If you're in Michael's shoes, you don't know what's going on, and that kind of paranoia and that confusion is at the heart of the film, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. So are we moving to Oscar Bounce, or are we moving to the next discussion?
Given that you've raised it, let's do Oscar Bounce, shall we? So this time 11 nominations, 6 wins, including some of the biggies. So one for Best Picture, beating Chinatown, The Conversation, Lenny, and Towering Inferno.
That's a good
award.
Yeah, good films in there.
Conversation, God rest his soul, Gene Hackman, and all
absolutely.
that. Best Director as well. So Coppola won for this. Best Supporting Actor, and we'll get on to his performance. De Niro for playing the young Vito. Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction, and then it won in some of the more technical ones, such as Dramatic Score as well. So it won 6. I think the one that we have to focus on where it didn't win, though, clearly is Best Actor. So it was a decent enough list this year. So other nominees were Jack Nicholson for Chinatown.
Oof,
also didn't win. Dustin Hoffman for Lenny. Albert Finney for Murder on the Orient Express. Bit of an odd one there, perhaps. But the winner, and I'm not sure anyone would have got this if they hadn't looked in advance, was Art Carney for Harry and Tonto.
Oh, that's such bullshit.
That performance beat Pacino for Godfather Part II, and successive. Well, actually, of course, Pacino was defeated in the Best Supporting Actor category last for the original film. Yeah, he was robbed and ended up, as you know, Charlie, winning it for Scent of a Woman in the 1990s.
Because the Academy felt guilty, because they just went, well, we've got to give it something. I mean, I know I'm basically a minority of one on this podcast that thinks Scent of a Woman's any good. But if you're going to give it to him for that before he started making his
Yeah.
Succession dross in the late 90s.
And I think like Art Carney, yeah, I'm sure he was close to death at that point too. So
Who
they're
is Art
like,
Carney, by the way? I don't know anything about
Art
him.
Carney was, I don't know if you guys ever watched The Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason.
The only thing I know about that
Yeah.
is on TV and Back to the Future. That's it.
Oh God.
Sorry.
That's like a classic TV program over in the US. But yeah, it was Jackie Gleason and Art Carney. Art Carney was Norton. And yeah, you know, like they were kind of like an Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy guy. So he was kind of like the funny guy to Gleason's kind of funny and straight man. But yeah, Carney was very popular. And I think that that's what people saw him as, that, you know, he's probably never going to be nominated for an Oscar again. Who knows how long he's going to be with this. And that's what I hate what the Oscars do, is that they get a little too sentimental instead of giving, you know, who actually deserves it. Because I mean, Al Pacino did do an incredible performance in this. And I was going to ask you too, I know that for the best supporting actor, like there was the guy who played you know, Frankie.
Wait a minute. Oscar Bance is on it.
No, well, I think what the point Joe's making is that there were three members of this cast were up for Best Supporting Actor. So De Niro, who won it, and then Michael Gazzo, who played Pentag. He did a much better pronunciation. Pentangeli, that's it. Yeah, and Lee Strasberg as well, who played Hyman Roth. So they all got nominated. Robert Duvall again. He should have been up there, I think, but. Yeah, they all got nominated, but clearly there's an absolute standout winner from that. Surely it would be inarguable that De Niro deserved to win it for his performance.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I did want to mention too, like I watched this within the last month or so. I watched it a couple of times, and especially I watched, I rewatched the scenes when they're in Little Italy with De Niro, and he's just so amazing. Like it's kind of hard to play a character that's already pre-established. And he does such a good job with it too, especially when he grows the mustache. Like towards the end, you know, he looks a little bit more like Brando.
After our recent Sean Connery miniseries, it really struck me how charismatic De Niro is as an actor in here. How handsome he is, honestly. Let's call it out where we see, you know, so he's like, he looks brilliant and he just grabs your attention on the screen. So I think Pacino's acting in this is incredible as well. It's just so much acting with his eyes. I saw it in the original Godfather and in part two as well. But De Niro's just got an edge to him. I know it's difficult not everything has to be a contest who's the best in this, but for me, De Niro is, to contradict myself, De Niro does stand out. It's just he's cut from granite in this, but he's also got vulnerability at the same time, especially earlier, and it's entirely plausible the arc that he takes you on, that kind of journey from poor immigrant, hardworking, you know, is it Baker's that he works at, and then his descent into petty crime, and the way that he straddles that. It's just an absolutely compelling performance, and there's an argument that he should have been in the best actor category for this as well. I think it's an equivalent meaty role to the one that Pacino plays.
Yeah. And what I did too the other night is I watched it without reading the subtitles, because a lot of times you miss, you know, him acting. I mean, you hear his voice and you have to read the subtitles, and you sometimes like miss his face and his expressions, his hand gestures and all that. And he's just incredible. It's like he just gets the character. Like he does like some kind of motions that Brando had done in the previous film, and you'll believe him, you know. And the difference again between him and, like, say, well, I guess we'll get into like Dom Fanucci, is that deep down inside he's a good guy. I mean, he's trying to do the right thing for people.
For
the people, you know,
his community,
his city, you know. So he does have a heart. He's not a ruthless killer, and you can see that the people respect him, but they also love him too. And he's just so amazing in this. I mean, it blows me away. And when you think again, like what he went on to do, like there's so many roles that he's just like hit it out of the park. You know, he's definitely one of the greatest actors we've ever had. And it is like, I think when they, you know, sorry if I'm going off on a tangent here, but when they think of greatest actors out there, that Brando usually comes to mind for a lot of people. But damn it, I mean, when you think about the number of movies that De Niro has done that have been classics and they've just been great, I just can't think of anyone better.
Well,
As a lifelong Pacino fan, even I have to probably agree with that. You can put up Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, Scarface. You can start putting those up from De Niro's, from Pacino's point of view. But yeah, De Niro just like carried on, and then you get him doing comedy. At some point. So late 80s, he did Midnight Run with Charles Grodin, and then equally 3 years later, then he's in Cape Fear, and he's playing one of the most haunting sort of horror characters. And he's very I think he's probably more versatile than Pacino. I have to concede that.
But I don't even think the word versatile does justice to it, really. Just that, I know, saying the same sort of thing, that range that he's got. But I would go further than that. Before we sat down and rewatched these films for these couple of pods that we've done, if you'd asked me what De Niro's best performance was, I'd have said Raging Bull, probably. But I think, having seen Godfather Part II, I think this is it. I think this is his best performance. If I had to choose one, just like actually, I think Pacino's best performance in his storied, gloried career is the original Godfather. I think that these two films, and that's why they're such amazing films, and we're scoring them 10s and 9.5s out of 10. They stood the test of time because of these central performances. The story is brilliant. The original source material is fantastic. The supporting cast, the direction, all that wraps into it. But you've got these two absolutely magnetic, compelling performances at the heart of it. And on some of the criticism, and there is some criticism of Godfather Part II, if you look at the original reviews that came out, they think the flashback and kind of it's a sequel but a prequel at the same time is doesn't really work, or is slightly sort of cheating direction by Coppola, but not for me. I think it adds a layer of richness to it completely. And if we hadn't had De Niro's performance here, we'd be missing out on one of cinema's greatest achievements, I think, as a leading actor.
Yeah, I don't think it would have won Best Picture if it didn't have the flashback scenes in it.
Absolutely, could be right. I think I'm going to be controversial here for De Niro performances, but it's a toss-up between Heat or Casino. I prefer Casino. I preferred his acting in Casino than to Goodfellas. Again, slightly controversial, but yeah, I thought he had more to do in Casino. But yeah, wonderful, absolutely wonderful actor. Where are we next on the list? Where are we going next?
Well, we're kind of with the next couple are the De Niro part of the film, really. So there's kind of Vito's arrival at Ellis Island when he's a kid, and this, let's segue into the elimination of Don Fanucci. So we've kind of touched on some of this, but the bit when it's pre-De Niro, even when he's just a little boy, those opening scenes when they go to the local Don in Corleone, and is it Angelini? Is that what it's called? The guy, and the mother's pleading for him to spare her youngest son. He's already executed or
Don
killed
Chichi.
the father. Yeah, and she pulls a knife on him, and she gets blown away with a shotgun. That's a hell of a uppercut for the viewers. You just don't see that coming. Just murders that woman, and then the kid barely escapes with his life. And had his bodyguards had their act together a bit, been better shots, then the rest of the film wouldn't have happened from that point as well. And his arrival on Ellis Island, I'm not making any woke political points here, but that kind of sea of humanity, that immigration coming to New York, the fuel of the kind of the boom of the American century that happened as a result of that. You've got this kind of it's incredible on an individual level. This young boy alone goes into quarantine for 3 months because he's got smallpox, but the seething massive immigration around him as well. It's just cinema on an epic scale, really.
Yeah,
and they just got that so right too. I mean, you believe that whole thing. You believe that it's taking place like, what would you say how old was he back then? Like, did they say like 10 years old or something like that?
9 or 10, I think.
I don't know what year it was, but it seems like it fits the period, perfectly. And where they filmed it. It was not that period at the time. And again, even like when you see De Niro older, that looks like it doesn't look like the 1970s. It looks like the 1920s, I would say, is when that might have occurred.
I think it's even sooner. I think it's pre-World War I, isn't it? So it's kind of like 1910, something like that, maybe. But but I think it's also a sign of the director's confidence and competence as well, because this could easily flirt with cliche, like these wide-eyed, ragged immigrants looking up, and there's a Statue of Liberty, this kind of symbol of hope and a new world. Yeah, take a wrong step there, and it kind of it's a bit of a missed opportunity, isn't it? But he just does it, and he weaves all that imagery in, and still kind of leaves you feeling stirred and moved as you see this scene. It's really powerful stuff.
Definitely, it is. And again, I think you talked right at the start, the scene where he's basically stalking his prey because he knows he's going to have to.
What do we think of the Don Fanucci character then? So in his white suit, as Simpsons fans, myself and Joe here, obviously there's a Don Homer satire of this, and maybe it does kind of lend itself to satire.
Also,
you got the
you're dying to
boss.
talk Simpsons. Go on, talk Simpsons.
Yeah, also Millhouse too. Didn't he wear a white suit? And
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he's teaching Lisa Italian. Yeah, no, it's funny too because like again, like I think we're all aware that there was a different cut of the film where when they released it on television, it was longer and it was in chronological order, and there was more scenes in it. And I'm glad they cut out the majority of the scenes in it, because what it kind of shows is that De Niro sees Don Fanucci in an alley, and he gets attacked by like these 3 kids. I mean, and they're not even, if they're teenagers, they're like maybe 13, 14, like they're very young. But he ends up like they're basically kind of making fun of him, and like they're throwing stuff at him, and they're kind of circling him. And then, he's yelling at them, screaming at them. And then one of them slits his throat, and he's screaming for help. And De Niro is in the corner watching all this. He's not stepping out because he doesn't want Fanucci to know that, he sees all this. But when you watch that, you realize that De Niro knows that this guy is not the tough guy that he makes himself out to be, and that he's basically a fraud. And he might not even have like a real gang. Like he might be just a complete fraud going around the neighborhood. Yeah. Telling that, it's like, you need to pay me or else, I have people, I'm very powerful. But he could be a complete nothing, and just making that up. And I think that that's what, the extended cut kind of shows. And I'd rather than not be, I'd rather him be kind of like an actual mafia don, that the people fear and that they have a reason to fear him. So I'm kind of glad that they cut that out.
See, I found it, I forgot Bruno Kirby was in this. But whenever I watched him, I just couldn't get out of my head the guy from City Slickers. I don't know why I couldn't disassociate it, but I just thought he's a comic actor. He's not but in this he is. He's fantastic in this. He's really, really good in this. But yeah, sorry, I know I'm putting City Slickers not in the same in the same sentence as Godfather Part II, but it was amusing.
He's a bit comedic in this too.
Not much though.
Yeah, but his voice is very funny. I guess that's something that he can't change. But what I also love about this too is that these actors, I'm sure they don't know fluent Italian. And I mean, especially De Niro, I don't think he's as Italian as like they make him out to be. Like he's mixed. But you would think that these people like that, it's their first language. And I think that's fantastic. Like, because you buy into it, you completely buy into it, that every single one had, immigrated from Italy, when they just landed here or whatever, or they lived and that was their language and they barely knew English. And again, it just goes to show, like, especially for De Niro, how seriously he takes the role. And I don't even know how he prepared to do the role, but I completely buy that he's Italian in this.
And also by and again, I think you talked about it at the start, that the sense that you buy into the fact that it's almost like he's thankful for being able to reach the States, that he then wants to look after this community. He then wants to give something back. So where he sees injustice, he's basically going to try to correct it, and he's trying to see whether or not he could get away with it. But De Niro sees right through, and goes, I think there's a power grab to be had here because of the way that he treats other people. What is it? The guy that's with the rent?
Finucci?
No,
Oh,
no,
the
yeah. When he goes to him and says, "Oh, and he ends up paying and said
mm.
his 6 or 9 months worth of rent, you know, and then when he realizes sort of who he was, he comes back and gives the money back, and you got right, okay. So now
That's a very funny scene.
yes, yeah, that's a great scene. But yeah, it's just as I say, those segments and that shot along the rooftops is just that
Eh,
might be the best shot in this.
And I read also that's one thing that like the movies don't really portray that the books may have expanded on more is that Vito Corleone was a genius. Like when it came to being a Don, that's why he was so respected. Like he was very cunning about what he did. Like where again, Sonny was a hothead, and he was always afraid that Sonny would just like act on his emotions. And even like during the meeting with Salazzo, and he told Sonny later, he's like, you never let people know what you're thinking. It's like, and he taught Michael how to be a Don, but for whatever reason, because when you think about it, he was a little boy that came over here. He just became very intelligent on how to deal with people. Because like when he started working like in the deli with his friend and all that, even when they let him go because Finucci wanted his nephew to be in there, he was very understanding. He says, "Don't worry about it. You've always been good to me, and I'll never forget what you did for me." And he just leaves, and he wouldn't accept, the food that the owner would give him. And again, it just shows what a good heart he has. That he loves his wife, he loves his family. But then at one point, he just turns and decides that Finucci's got to go. And and then like you see him again, like how he is like afterwards, like when he comes back and he has the mustache, and I guess it was Roberto, who owned the apartments and was going to evict that lady. He's still very kind and rational to the guy. He's
Yes.
trying to, he doesn't throw him against the wall and grab him by the neck and put a knife up to him or anything like that. He wants him to fear him without a knife, and that's why he says, why don't you ask your friends about me?
Yes.
And again, and I think he says that, and also like Brando says that in the very beginning of The Godfather, like when the Undertaker comes to him and he says, if you would have, provided me with friendship, the people would respect you, and then they would fear you, knowing that, I was your friend, and that's what it is. Like he wants respect, but he has to earn that respect, also through fear. Like people realize he killed Finucci. They thought he was a powerful Don. And like, if he killed him, he's got to be really, really bad, but he's also very kind too. Like he wasn't an asshole. Like he didn't become the new Finucci.
Yes.
He became a very loving character where the whole community respected him, and they realized that you have our back. We realized that. I don't think he collected money like Finucci did. I mean, he probably did business. He probably did illegal things like gambling and maybe alcohol and all that. But I don't think he went after the community like he would. And he was well respected.
Yeah, definitely.
He's a much more sympathetic character. You're right, because his motivations are, yes, of course, power, but also family and his community. Whereas compare and contrast to Michael, who has some of that, but Michael goes kind of so off piste. His kind of focus is so far elsewhere away from his family that ultimately his wife ends up having an abortion and leaves him. And compare and contrast that with Vito's wife, who he has a loving, happy marriage, and ultimately his death is in the garden playing with his grandchild. Yeah, the idea that kind of Michael succeeds him and has the same life and narrative arc in his life would be an absolutely incorrect interpretation of these two films. It shows that whatever Vito achieved, he achieved, and Michael suffers much more as a result of his decisions and choices. And ultimately, it's certainly at the end of Godfather Part II, it's ambiguous as to whether or not Michael's choices were the right ones, and perhaps he shouldn't have, taken over the family in the way that he did.
Well, the thing that the difference between Michael and Vito again is like, everyone respected and feared Vito in the first movie. And then when Michael started to take over, like when he, again, assassinated Sollozzo and McCluskey, and then he came back from Italy, and Vito was handing over the reins to Michael, Clemenza and Tessio, they didn't really feel like Michael was capable of being a godfather. So he had to be tougher than more ruthless than his father was to prove that he was. And that's why you had that scene at the end where you see all the people being murdered. He had to prove to all of them that he was fucking badass. And he's been doing that consistently. And that's where, again, it's different, how he's different from Vito. Even in this movie, he's got to prove how fucking badass that he is. Like, and at the end that he's got to kill all of his enemies and all that. He wants to be his father, but he can't be his father.
Yeah, and that's why these films work so well together, because one is achieving that position through your charisma and the scenes that we see from De Niro, versus inheriting it and then having to prove that you don't just, you're not just a nepo baby. You're evil enough and determined enough to hold that position, which probably should get us on to kind of focusing on Michael a little bit more, and perhaps the next sets of scenes, which are the scenes in Cuba and Havana, which my little introduction to would be how gorgeous does that look? Compare and contrast, was it 1950s at this era? 1950s America and Cuba at this time versus post-war Britain. And I think we started rationing in place at this stage, didn't we? But
we did until 53.
Looks incredible, but for me, and this is where these are the scenes where Fredo kind of gives away the fact that he's the traitor in the family. But for me, there was a big red flag when he ordered a banana daiquiri at the bar they were sat at. Any supposedly heterosexual man that orders a banana daiquiri in that sort of situation, I think he's just asking for trouble. Eh?
It's true, but wait a minute. So is that all cocktails?
No. Some there are manly cocktails out there. I'm a fan of Negroni or an old fashioned myself.
Where do you? Well, yeah, but you go like Tom Collins and stuff like that. But where do you stand on pina colada?
Yeah, I would have ordered pina colada if I was in Cuba.
What, with a pair of Speedos on and like 3 sparklers, and it's like, no,
what, Fredo has Speedos on too?
How about a Cuba Libre? I mean, that's rum. That's perfect. That's acceptable. Crikey, we get into what. What about a long? And this is a real one, Joe. By the way, just in case something you're making up. A long, slow, comfortable screw by the beach is a cocktail.
Oh, that's really.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what you're going to order, is it, Charlie? With a cheeky wink to the waiter? Yeah.
No.
Well,
I'm going to order sex on the beach.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. We have a drink called Sex on the Beach. That's different from.
Yeah, we invented that. Thanks.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
But you also, so you invented Sex on the Beach and a one long screw on the beach?
A long, slow, comfortable screw on the beach.
What's the difference?
One's vodka. God knows. I don't know what's in it.
Have you ever had a fingering in the changing rooms, though? That's
that's another drink.
No, don't listen to him. He's trying to lull you in. I'll protect you, Joe. I'll protect you. I see what you were doing there, you little scamp. Right. Should we move? Well, we are in Cuba now, and again, what was the line? Because you saw Michael's face, the dawning realization that it was Fredo. What was the line that gave it away? I can't remember.
I remember they were seeing Superman, guy with the big penis, and he was going to fuck that girl.
Yeah.
And the senator said, he goes, Fredo, where'd you ever find this place? And he goes, oh, it was Johnny Ola. Yeah, it was Johnny Ola. He goes, we went to this place. Old man Roth, he'd never come down to this place. And that's when he realized that they were talking. But I did want to say too that scene when they are ordering drinks. I mean, I like that scene too because it shows Michael still loves his brother. He knows he's a fuck up. He's not too bright and he could never be the Godfather. And they kind of give him like little dumb shit things to do, like go out in Vegas. And then I'm sure they tell them, it's like, don't ever fuck with my brother. Just make him think that he has an important job. But it's just nice to see that, he really cares for him. Cause like, even like when they arrive in Cuba, he says, he goes, how about me and you go out for a drink, Fredo? Just the two of us, you know? And he just wants to talk with his brother. He wants to spend time with them. And then, you know, like Fredo kind of confesses that, you know, he thinks that, you know, his mother used to tell him that he was a gypsy and he didn't belong. You know, he was brought by the gypsies and that he wasn't really their natural son. And he sometimes thinks the same thing too. Because I mean, he realized, like, again, after seeing that he has no control over his wife at the communion, he's got a bit of a fucked up life.
Mm.
You know, he feels bad for him, and he says, you know, it's, you know, you, what did he say about his father? You know, not everyone could be their father, or something like that.
Mm.
But it always makes me feel good to see that scene because you can tell that Michael really loves him, and there's a part of Fredo that regrets that he was involved, but he's so
Yes.
fucking stupid, and he probably had a couple of drinks in him that he made it slip that, you know, he had hung out with Johnny Ola prior to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we only get the full extent when Fredo's the only one around the dinner table scene. Fredo's the only one that stands up for him against everybody else, especially James Caan, where he says he goes into the military, and
Yeah.
and so there is that bond because of that. And you think, well, oh, okay. And the fact that he says nobody kills him while mum, you know, while mum is still alive, you know, there's, again, it's all about respect. But he knows that at some point she's going to die, and at some point he's gonna have to kill his brother, or rather have his brother killed. It's a
And that
great
was a
scene,
big
though,
question.
isn't it? A
Yeah.
great scene.
Yeah.
He broke my heart. I know
Oh
it
no, it
was
always
you,
gives me the
Fredo.
chills when I see it.
Yeah, so
You know, it's
good.
like right at midnight or the new year ringing in, and he just goes to wish a happy new year to his brother and just plants him one right out in the mouth, you know.
Mm. And it's the look of Fredo as he like
Like,
does this thing where he goes back, as in like, oh, what? Oh, like it's just exceptional. Everybody in that scene, exceptional.
yeah, he just grabs his skull like where he can't even leave. And he's like, I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. You broke my heart. And I've said that so many times because I got a dysfunctional family. You know, I've said that so many times.
Dom, what about you? You like the uprising, the revolution, the events?
Yeah, I don't know. I felt some of that felt a bit tacked on, or just like it was just supporting noise and drama to what was already fairly dramatic scenes. I thought so. It was colourful, and I enjoyed it. But yeah, the Cuba scenes probably my least favorite part of the film. Really, I could kind of, especially after the heights of what we talked about earlier with De Niro, this felt like a slight lull. Maybe I thought the Hyman Roth character was both. Uh, Kind of, you'd hate to have to deal with that guy, wouldn't you? He's sitting around with his kind of gut hanging out and his hairy chest and his hairy back and all that sort of, you know. But that's why he's kind of authentically grimy and horrible and sleazy, I suppose. And the fact that he too underestimated Michael, much to his eventual comeuppance as well. Yeah, I thought these scenes were good, but yeah, clearly dominated by that scene you two have just discussed so eloquently, the Fredo betrayal. That was brilliant.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that like Hyman Roth's like whole agenda, I think, was stupid. I mean, I know he was mad that Michael had Mo Green killed, but he had to
Yes.
realize how powerful Michael was. I mean, he really was the most powerful mafia leader in the nation. You know, why would you want to start a war with that? I mean, I guess he thought he was smarter than Michael, but it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. You know, that he would risk his own life and even his family's life on trying to get revenge on just because Mo Green died. But there's a scene in there that every time I watch, I never get it. Like right before midnight, and Michael sends out his goon to go and kill Roth, who's in the hospital. You see like the military walking up, and they just walk straight up, you know, to the hospital, and then they shoot like, you know, the assassin. Who the fuck are they, and who the fuck called them? You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, don't know, but yeah. We get on to a bit of passionate Al Pacino when he finds out that it wasn't a miscarriage, that she deliberately aborted the baby. I again, I think Diane Keaton is the weakest thing in this. I don't think she's. I don't think she. We know that she is capable of acting. I think in this she probably lets herself down a little. But my goodness, look at you. You talked, Dom, about him acting with his eyes, acting, with his expressions. Well, this is it. This is the scene, which basically shows, and it's almost like it's happening it is happening in real time, where it's all dawning with him that everything's happening, and it's just his face contorts, and then it's like, boom, out comes the rage. Incredible.
Yeah, because the way that the sequence, I think I'm right in saying, is they have the Senate hearing is the bit before this. So she's had what we believe is a miscarriage, and that's been reported, and obviously sad. And then they have the Senate hearings, and that's kind of Michael pulling the strings in the background. He's not front and center in that. That's the other actors and the brothers were over from Sicily, and that works really well. That's an effective scene. And so he's had this triumph where he's on the cusp of being indicted for these murders and for perjury, and he's been publicly named as a leading mafia boss in America, and then he's kind of in his office, and and then that's his scene with his wife. And for me, this is where you have these kind of failings on his part. So in contrast to his father, where family was the central piece of the jigsaw, for Michael, he's got his brother who's betrayed him, and he knows that, and he can't kill him yet. And then he's got his wife who just reveals this absolute bombshell, which any husband, any father would struggle to process, but especially I guess someone so steeped in the Catholic faith, and it's an even bigger portrayal, I'd imagine, than Fredo is. But he can't kill these people, at least not immediately, and so he has this linger, and that really just undermines his character and shows just how deep and dark it is for him to assume this role as Godfather. It doesn't spare any punches at all, and it's a pretty shocking scene. I think I'd be kinder to Diane Keaton than you would. I think it's a difficult role for any actress to have performed. I think she does it competently, if not as kind of memorably as some of the other performances in the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I think she was better in this one, and I would assume that her character probably drank a lot because she realized, what she got herself into, but she knew what she was getting herself into before. But I guess she loved him and she thought he was going to change. But my question every time I see this is, when the fuck did she have the abortion? Because she was never allowed outside the compound. I don't see when she could have had it done. Maybe that's like you have to suspend disbelief and all that, unless she did it to herself. But I can't see how they would have let her out, after the assassination attempt on
it could have been a routine doctor visit or something like that, and he comes in and he brings the necessary things possible in order to do it, perhaps.
But it is like, again, you do start to see, especially this time around, like I see how Michael started to get even darker at that point, because his brother betrayed him, and then his wife betrayed him, and that's like when he's like, now I'm going to kill all my enemies, and it's probably what caused the death of Fredo too, because he just like had enough, like he had lost it. But there was, and this is the first time, like when he talks to Fredo, and in the what is it, like the it's not a beach house, whatever it is, the pool house,
lake house,
and he asks, like, he's nice to him, and he says, all right, Fredo, could you tell me what you know about Roth and Johnny Ola? And he tells him a few things, and he's kind of vague, and he tries to say, it's like, look, Mike, I never knew it was going to be a hit. I just wanted something from myself because, I always felt like you guys think I'm stupid, kind of paraphrasing it. But this time I noticed, I think that would really put him over the edge. He says, is there anything else, Fredo? And he says, yeah, that the senator, and I forget what his name was, he's in Roth's pocket, and he could have told him that like weeks ago before the trial.
Yeah.
And for him to like hold on to that and just tell him at that point, that's when he said, right after he said that, he goes, you're dead to me, Fredo. I mean, I think that's what it was. It's like, you're so fucking stupid. Why wouldn't you, if you're trying to like make up for what you did, you should have told me every fucking thing that you knew, instead of me having to go into trial, potentially perjure myself, have no idea that Frank Pantangeli was going to come in and dispute everything that I said. Yeah, that's when I get like where he's like, yeah, I'm going to eventually kill him regardless of whatever happens.
Mm.
And then he also, sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
No, so I was going to wrap this kind of does bring us to the end of the film, really, doesn't it? We're kind of approaching that.
I was going to say, yeah.
Was there something else you wanted to say, Joe?
No, well, nothing from
me.
I
just like the whole him bringing Pantangeli's brother from Italy. That was a little smart move, but I didn't think he had much time to deal with it. But he had like a day to get him in a plane to come over. I feel like we're missing something with that too. But anyway, again, the end, like where he gets his revenge on a lot of people. I'm surprised he didn't kill Kay. I think it would be more realistic to kill her after all the shit that she said to him, and then lying about the miscarriage and intentionally killing his son, and him being at like on the edge as it was. I'm really surprised he never had her killed.
It is quite reminiscent, though, of the first film, isn't it? Where there's this kind of crescendo at the end of violence and settling of scores. I don't know. Is that a good thing because it links the two films? Is it slightly derivative? I don't know. It's
I think the ending of this film is perfect. There's no need. I'm going to go and watch it, but there's no need for a 3. I don't need to know what happened afterwards. And when we get to it, obviously, I know we're all going to watch it this next week and then reconvene next weekend to discuss it. But yeah, they could have just ended on that, and then 2 films absolutely perfect, complement each other absolutely spectacularly. Yeah,
I would have liked to have a 3, but I would like to have been made sooner, and I would like to have been a better story. Because I would like to know what happened, after all of that. But what's surprising too is that it looked like he was going to kill Tom. When he was back home and he asked Tom to tell him everything, and he left out that he was offered a position as manager of like these hotels and all that, and you could tell that Tom was scared too.
Yeah, it is a good point. It made me smile that the consigliere of the kind of leading mafia family gets job offers, like on got a LinkedIn profile or something like that. And you got tapped up by a headhunter. Again, that's another thing that's not spelled out, and is that deliberately ambiguous? Did some scenes get left on the cutting room floor? But his star seems to have fallen somewhat in this film, and it's a shame because he's not literally, but to all intents and purposes, part of the family. Perhaps again, it's just Pacino's descent into kind of absolute darkness that he gets to.
Might be. Well, anyway, let's wrap it up. Oh, okay. Sorry, Joe. No.
I was just going to say, well, to have him prove that he was still loyal, he had to go and talk to Frankie in prison and convince him to off himself.
Right. Anyway, next. Godfather Part III. I can't wait for that one. I don't think it'll be as praiseworthy as the previous 2 podcasts have been, but yes, who knows? Might see it in a different light. Who knows? Anyway, nice one. Joe, do you want to tell? You've got another podcast that you do, and I know on that podcast you actually recommend this podcast. So, do you want to tell people? If they like what they hear, they like what they see, where they can listen to you.
Yeah, I do a podcast called WDWNT Nerd Alert. It's part of there was once called the Walt Disney World News Today family of podcasts. And we basically talk about Marvel and Star Wars and DC and like all nerdy stuff. And basically because the last, like I would say, maybe 8 years, everything has kind of sucked. We've been doing nothing but bitch about everything that's been coming out because we're in a horrible time right now.
Yes, indeed we are.
And we miss good movies, and it's not only related to nerdy movies, it relates to all movies. Like, we need some good movies out there, and hopefully we'll get some this year.
Maybe I wouldn't hold your breath.
Well, another thing we need is some viewer recommendations. So after we've done our Connery mini-season, we've done, well, nearly done the Godfather little trio. So listeners, viewers, if you want to come in and suggest some films to watch, please do.
And don't suggest Jaws, because 12th of June, or as close as we can to the 12th of June, we will be discussing Jaws. So by all means, if you want to talk Jaws, jump on the YouTube page, fire away with questions. I can talk about it all day. I've got so many things that I can, like, I feel like it's going to be like a show and tell of stuff that I've got. I've got a piece of the boat. There's just loads of different things when it comes to Jaws, including a funny story of how I first discovered Jaws and Clue. It wasn't the cinema, and it wasn't the entire book. So yeah. Oof. Crikey, there's a spoiler for 3 months' time. There's not spoiler, trailer. Anyway, let's wrap it up. I'm going to say cheerio, everyone.
See you.
Arrivederci.
Bye.